In 2008, banks created a recipe for disaster when they started handing out insane loans to people who couldn't afford to pay them back. Seeing this risky situation, Michael Burry decided to take a stand and bet against the housing market. So eventually, when everything went south because people weren't able to pay back the loans that the banks were giving them, Michael Burry's hedge fund hit the jackpot. And we're talking billions.
He had all these people that were making tons of money on mortgages in around 2007. All of his friends, his fucking dumb friends, who didn't even fucking graduate college, making all this money in fucking mortgages. Fucking idiots, baboons, making money in fucking mortgages. Yeah. Once you see your friends making money in mortgages, immediately go, this is falling apart.
Meanwhile, the rest of the world was left scratching their heads trying to make ends meet. And today, I, your average suburban man, is going to be taking on the same trade, except a little more riskier and stupider. So this video could either go down in the Hall of Fame of YouTube, or I'll be a brokey.
You're broke!
So as I mentioned earlier, in 2008, the real estate market crashed because banks were handing out insane loans to people who couldn't afford them, like free candy. Now fast forward 15 years, the banks have clearly learned their lesson. Today, when you go to a bank and ask for a loan, you have to provide an in-depth detail of all of your financial information. So you might be asking, if the banks have learned their lesson and aren't providing crazy loans anymore, why am I going to be shorting the real estate market?
Every fucking idiot is making money in real estate right now, right? Every New York apartment's going for $5 million fucking dollars. This house over here is going for 20 million. Tell me, it's going down. It's going down. Okay? If your friend's wife never had a job in her life, is making money in real estate, it's going down. Bad.
It all starts with an event that we went through in 2020. You know the one, but let's not name it. During that time, the US government went on a money printing frenzy, making borrowing money insanely cheap. It was like a gold rush for borrowers. Not only were they handing out free money left and right like Oprah, but a lot of it ended up in the hands of people that didn't really need it. Some people were really whipping around in Lambos based off the money they got from the government for free. It was crazy. Now granted, karma caught up to them and those people are now sitting in a dungeon. But the point is, with the government throwing money around like confetti, people were able to grab bank loans for jaw-dropping 2% interest rate, which is essentially free money. Now unfortunately, like anything free, there's always strings attached. It's kind of like how we use social media for free, but behind the scenes, all of our data is being sold left and right. Well, that's kind of what happened with the stimulus checks and the relief payments, especially when it came to like PPP loans and EDD payments. They were fun when they were coming in, but fast forward to today, our economy is kind of in trouble. All that new money the government was printing out and handing out created inflation. Imagine you've got a Bugatti right now, and all the 15-year-olds on TikTok are drooling over it, thinking you're the coolest guy around. But if the supply of Bugattis start to soar, and suddenly your neighbors start having a Bugatti, your grandma has a Bugatti, your parents have a Bugatti, and now because everybody has a Bugatti, those 15-year-olds aren't going to be that impressed with you anymore. That's called inflation. So if you stepped outside your house within the past 2 years, you've noticed that prices of everything have shot through the roof. See, the cost of living is rising faster than people are getting raises at their job, and that becomes an issue because people now need pay raises to keep up with the standard of living. But in order to give employees their raises, companies need to get that money from somewhere. So what they do is raise their prices on all their products so they can have more cash flow coming in. And then they'll use that cash flow to give their employees the raises. And this is where things get a little tricky. With the cost of living prices going up, people now need a raise again to afford the same stuff that they were buying earlier. And this cycle can continue until George Washington is replaced by our friend Benji. Now, before you panic, there are people in charge that are making sure the US dollar never crashes. Meet Jerome Powell, the head honcho at the Federal Reserve, the man who's in control of the money printer. He has the power to decide how expensive it is to borrow money, and that is called an interest rate. Now, here's the thing. No matter where you live in the world, we all want to avoid the collapse of the US dollar because if that were to happen, it would wreak havoc on our economy and throughout the world because the US dollar plays an important role in international trade. So in order to avoid the US dollar going haywire, Papa Jerome has been increasing interest rates so it's been more expensive to borrow money. And it's all a part of a plan to avoid any fake businesses or any fake money inflating the stock market. So real quick, let's backtrack back to 2020. Back to the start of the pandemic where everyone was sitting at home bored out of their mind. A lot of companies began allowing people to work from home, and a ton of people began craving a bigger house. They wanted more space, a backyard to chill in, some extra office space. Mixed that with extremely low interest rates that the government was offering, It was like a golden opportunity knocking on everyone's door. And with these factors coming together, you had a perfect mix of demand and supply. Houses were just flying off the market. Now let's say I bought a $300,000 house in 2020 and put a 20% down payment of $60,000 on that house. And back then, the average interest rate was around 2.9%. And with property tax and all the other expenses included, the total of my monthly payment would be $1,400 a month, which I probably could afford. Now fast forward that to today, where the average interest rate is about 7.12%. If I were to buy the same $300,000 home, my monthly payment now becomes $2,000 a month, which may now become hard to afford. And you know what happens when people can't afford these higher payments? The demand for the homes start to drop. And that's when there's more houses available than there are people wanting to buy them. And when there's more houses available than people wanting to buy them, the prices are naturally going to drop. Prices naturally go down and become more affordable. And that's exactly what we've been seeing for the past 2 years. Papa Jerome has continuously been increasing interest rates, and I personally believe he's going to continuously raise them to avoid the collapse of the US dollar. Now, this is just my personal opinion, but I believe they'll raise it as high as possible. They'll go to any extent to avoid collapsing the US dollar. And I'd assume they'd be willing to crash any single market to make sure the US dollar keeps its value. Because the second we have hyperinflation and the US dollar loses its value, well, so does the power of the United States throughout the world. So it's kind of a big deal. And although we've been seeing interest rates going up, if we look at a graph of interest rates from the past 30 years, we're currently right here around 7%. And in the 1980s, it was over 18%. So we potentially still have a very long way to go. But if we plug that 18% into our mortgage calculator, that payment now becomes $4,000 a month, which maybe the top G can afford, but the average Joe sure can't. So home prices eventually have to come back down to become more affordable. Now, these interest rates and numbers do reflect what I'm seeing in the real world, because when you would go see a home that was listed for $1 million 2 years ago, the seller would kindly tell you to keep pushing because they already got 20 cash offers, 20% over the asking price within days of listing. But now whenever you go visit an open house, the realtor is following up with you to see if you're interested or not. The homes are staying on the market for much longer and aren't selling nearly as quick. I'm even seeing homes that I have saved on Zillow that are literally dropping in price and staying on the market for months, which was just completely not the case 2 years ago. The stimmy vibe, just not a vibe anymore. Now, since I won't be buying any property anytime soon, I need a way to fuel a thrill and pass some time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be betting on the housing market going down.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Now, there's a couple of ways to do this, but knowing me, I'm going to do it in the most stupidest and riskiest way possible. Because no risk, no Rory, baby. Or should I say Bugatti?
Well, what color is your Bugatti?
Stock ticker DRV is an ETF that takes an index of the largest US real estate companies and allows you to short them just by buying the stock. So if you're not familiar with what an ETF is, imagine you have a magical basket right here. And this holds a lot of things like toys, cars, Legos, dolls. Now, instead of toys or any of the other stuff in here, an ETF is basically a basket that holds companies in it. And it basically holds fractions of these companies inside of this little basket. So when you put money into an ETF, you're basically buying a fraction of all these companies that are inside this ETF. So you become a teeny tiny owner of all of these companies all at once. It's basically like owning a piece of a bunch of toys all at once, or a piece of different Lego sets all at once. The cool thing is, when these companies make money inside the ETF, you also make money. Your piece in that basket grows. And if a company struggles a little bit, you still have some grace because the other companies inside this ETF can save you. It's basically like having a bunch of friends there helping each other out. That's basically how an ETF works. It's basically a liquid basket full of little companies inside of it, and it can help your money grow. Now, DRV is an inverse ETF. So the price of the ETF actually drops if the companies inside of the ETF rise. But wait, it gets even more wild. DRV is not your regular ETF. DRV is a 3x leveraged ETF. So what that means is for every 1% that the companies inside ETF grow, DRV drops by 3%. It's already a crazy bet, and I just found out that DRV also has option calls, so you already know I'm about to go in with that. So I'm going to be putting in $50,000 worth of out-of-money call options on this 3x leveraged ETF. It's almost as if I'm betting against the safest, most solid asset class in the entire world, in the most dangerous and riskiest way possible. Okay, order fulfilled. So I'll either make a follow-up video on this by the end of the year to see where we're at with this option that we just did, or I'll update you guys through my Instagram or Twitter. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.